You are listening to RadioTalkies FM.
So what if the history the history we rely on, what if it started to crumble? And at the same time, these deeper, almost mythic forces began to stir.
Right.
And the tools we had, powerful, yes, but also strangely cryptic.
Yeah, that's the setup. Yeah.
Today, we're looking at this really fascinating vision of a near-future city, Eumeswil.
Yeah, and our mission today, we want to understand this place. Eumeswil, explore its tech things called the Phonaphor in this system, the Luminar.
Okay.
And also look at how people, individuals, actually navigate this reality where history is fading and these more fundamental ancient forces seem to be coming back into play.
Yeah, this is like the Urgrund and the time wall.
Exactly. Those are key concepts we need to dig into, the time wall and the Urgrund.
Okay, great. All right, let's dive right into these sources then. Let's see where they take us.
So good.
So the sources, they drop us straight into Eumeswil, and the description is, well, it's quite arresting, a city existing without history.
Yeah, that phrase, without history, it really captures the core of the setting, doesn't it?
It does. It feels like a radical break.
It signifies exactly that. A break from how we normally think about, the flow of time, human events. And the texts bring in this idea of the Zeitmauer.
Which means?
Time wall. It's not physical, obviously. It's presented as this profound transition point, a critical juncture.
Okay.
And the sources suggest it might actually mark the end of modernity's whole view of history, that linear, progressive idea.
A time wall. That sounds monumental. And it's not a smooth transition, is it? The sources seem clear on that.
Not at all, no. They describe it as incredibly volatile. A place of terrible interplay is one phrase used.
Terrible interplay.
Wow. Yeah. And initiation pangs. Sounds like a really painful, difficult squeezing through a bottleneck.
So not just societal change, but something more fundamental.
Exactly. It suggests a maybe even traumatic shift in the nature of reality itself.
Okay, so what happens after this time wall? Or maybe while people are caught in it? What's life like when that historical framework just collapses?
Well, according to these sources, the old structures, the big stories we told ourselves about history, they've basically worn out. Or they just seem meaningless.
Right.
So life in Eumeswil becomes very focused on the immediate, on pragmatic survival.
Just getting by.
Yeah. And there's a blurring of lines, reality, dream, a kind of detachment from those big historical narratives and goals. The sources use this term fellowization.
Fellowization.
It describes this settling into a kind of everyday existence. No strong historical sense, no pull towards grand collective projects. It's like society is just exhausted, retreating to the now.
Right. Pragmatic survival is the key. And even in that kind of immediate, maybe blurred reality, technology is still central.
Oh, definitely.
The sources highlight two specific technologies. The Phonaphor, which sounds every day, and the more complex Luminar. Let's start with the Phonaphor. What do the sources tell us?
The Phonaphor is, well, it's essentially what we'd call a mobile phone.
Okay.
Carried by the more, let's say, established citizens. And its main function seems to be about solvency, quick payments.
So like mobile banking and ID rolled into one.
Pretty much.
No.
Enables easy transactions. Almost everyone of a certain status has one. It's mentioned you can pay faster than with old methods. Accounts update instantly. It's just functional, basic tech for the immediate present.
Okay, so the Phonaphor handles the day-to-day, the transactions, maybe status. But then there's the Luminar. That sounds different.
Yes, very different. It's presented as much more sophisticated, technologically, but also conceptually. It's mainly a tool for scholars.
Right.
An advanced archival search and retrieve system. Think of it like an incredibly high-tech library mixed with a powerful research engine.
Okay, so what can a scholar actually do with it? What does it give access to?
Its function is accessing these huge archives of history and data. Information drawn from catacombs.
Catacombs, meaning?
Sources that survived various catastrophes, apparently. The texts call it a tremendous petrified memory.
Wow. Petrified memory.
Yeah. So scholars use it for, standard historical research documents, records, memoirs, but it goes way deeper than that.
Deeper how?
It can simulate historical events, let users sort of step into past moments, and it's used to extract the essence of historical patterns, to see the deeper currents under the surface.
Simulate history. That's incredibly powerful. Where is this thing kept?
Highly secret, according to the sources. Locations like the Casbah, the Historical Institute.
Okay. And the description of its nature. This really jumped out at me. It functions like a time machine that somehow also abolishes time.
Yeah, it's paradoxical phrasing, isn't it?
It is, allowing the user to hear the melody of history but forget the instrument. What does that even mean?
Well, it suggests getting at the underlying meaning, the pattern, without getting lost in the raw data or the specific mechanism of retrieval. And it's linked to meta-technology.
Meta-technology.
Yeah, advanced tech that might go beyond just computation, maybe mimicking or even enhancing human cognitive, perhaps even spiritual functions.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, especially with that specific word the sources use. The Luminar is described as sphinx-like.
Sphinx-like. Yeah, that's a really loaded term.
It definitely doesn't sound like a typical search engine or even AI we're dealing with now.
Exactly. Modern AIs often aim for that human-sounding output, right, to ChatGPT. To chat, give you neat summaries, answer questions in a human-like way.
Sure.
But calling the Luminar sphinx-like, that suggests its output isn't necessarily user-friendly, not conversational.
More like cryptic. Puzzles.
Perhaps. It implies access to knowledge that might be symbolic, layered, needing deep interpretation. Real intellectual heavy lifting from the scholar.
So it gives you access to potentially everything, maybe even layers beyond normal perception.
Right, access to this vast, deep knowledge.
But it doesn't just hand you the answers on a plate like a chatbot.
Precisely. It's not about easy answers. It's a tool for grappling with immense data, the dissolving patterns of the past, maybe the emerging realities too. But its enigmatic nature hints at the limits of just, rational tech means for truly grasping what's going on.
Which really brings us to what is going on, this fundamental shift. As history weakens, the sources say something deeper is stirring. The Urgrund.
Yes, the Urgrund. It's described as the primal ground of being, the most fundamental level of matter.
And it's linked strongly to the Earth.
Very strongly. Identified with the Earth in its deepest, most fundamental, almost sort of maternal aspect.
And human activity, especially our technology, is somehow interacting with this.
Yes. The sources suggest that human activity, particularly science and tech, often linked to materialism in these texts, is actively penetrating this Urgrund, boring through layers of reality that were previously untouched.
Boring through.
And this encounter is framed as a shared initiation throw between the Mother Earth Urgrund and the Sun Man. It's a two-way street.
Okay, so what's the consequence? What happens when we start boring through the primal ground?
The suggestion is that forces, phenomena, things that were previously confined to, say, myth or deep time or mythology, they start to reassert themselves. They begin influencing events in the present.
And these aren't historical forces in the usual sense?
No, not rational, not predictable in that way. They're described as magical, elemental, even titanic, telluric, operating completely outside historical norms, outside rational control.
Wow. What kind of things are we talking about? Any examples hinted at?
Well, the text allude to things like unpredictable biological transformations, sudden changes in species, gigantism, mutations maybe, even the appearance of creatures known only from ancient records or myths.
Okay.
And the sources mention that fields like prehistory, zoology, geology become much more important in this era. That reflects the shift away from purely historical explanations towards these deeper, more fundamental forces.
So it sounds like the Earth itself, the Urgrund, is kind of waking up and actively influencing the world, using humans somehow.
That's the idea. Man is seen as being used almost like an instrument by the Earth Urgrund towards a process called Vergeistigung.
Spiritualization.
Yeah, spiritualization or becoming spirit. Man is described as a conscious, layer-determining being, an index fossil of this new epoch. We're participating in this profound transformation, not just of society, but of the Earth itself. Reality is being reshaped.
Then alongside these deep elemental forces, the sources also bring in things that feel ancient, like astrology. Why is that relevant here?
Yes, astrology comes up. It's presented as a kind of counterpoint to the purely scientific, mechanical view of time.
Okay.
It links life to cosmic cycles, represents what sources call fate time.
Fate time.
This isn't the steady tick-tock of a clock. It's a qualitative view of time, non-monotonous, where certain moments have specific potential, specific meaning. It's described as leading the spirit into collapsed mine shafts, for insight,
Collapsed mindset.
suggesting access to a deeper, non-linear understanding of reality, something different from just rational analysis.
Okay, so this picture is getting really complex. We have Eumeswil, this chaotic post-historical city. Old structure's gone. The Earth's primal ground, the Urgrund, is stirring, unleashing elemental, maybe mythic forces.
Oh, yeah.
And there's technology like Luminar, immense power, immense access, but cryptic, sphinx-like. How do people actually navigate all this overwhelming chaos? The sources talk about different stances.
They do, and many people, as you'd expect, are just swept along, carried by mass movements. Or they cling desperately to old ideas, old traditions that just don't work anymore.
Like the narrator's father and brother are shown doing.
Exactly. Or you have others, described as anarchists, who try to fight the system. But the sources argue they're still fundamentally bound by the very society they oppose.
Right. But the narrator himself, he takes a different path. He proposes the stance of the Anarch.
Yes, the Anarch. Presented as the sort of positive alternative to the anarchist. And the key insight there is about inner freedom.
Inner freedom.
Cultivating spiritual sovereignty, maintaining a deliberate detachment, a distinct identity that's independent of whatever regime is in power or whatever chaos is unfolding outside.
So you observe the forces, the rules.
You see them. You accept them as objective facts of the external world, the tyranny in Eumeswil, the chaos, whatever it is.
But you don't buy into them.
Exactly. You don't grant them legitimacy on an inner level. You don't recognize them or pledge allegiance in your core.
So you operate within the system, play by the external rules maybe.
Yes, you navigate it.
But you're not of it. You're playing your own game inside.
Precisely. Aiming for minimal friction. The Anarch is described as someone who cares more about the substance of the world than its shadow. This inner detachment, this spiritual sovereignty, it's presented as the key to survival. How you keep your integrity, your freedom, when everything outside is volatile.
Being your own master, regardless of circumstance.
That's the core idea. It's a really powerful insight about where resilience truly lies when the external world is just constantly shifting.
Okay, let's try and bring these threads together. Synthesize this picture the sources are painting.
Okay.
Eumeswil, post-historical world. Old structures dissolved. The Earth's primal ground, the Urgrund, is stirring, unleashing deep time, maybe mythic forces.
Right. And technology exists within this huge shift.
Yeah.
The Phonaphor is there for the day-to-day pragmatism in this dissolving world.
It's keeping things running.
Yeah. But the Luminar is the big tool for the scholar trying to understand it all, giving this incredible access to information, the huge petrified memory of history, its patterns, even simulations of the past.
And potentially hinting at these deeper realities that are now becoming relevant again.
Exactly.
But that sphinx-like nature of the Luminar seems absolutely key to the message here about technology.
It feels very deliberate, doesn't it? Especially that contrast with something like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
In our world, AI often strives for accessibility, human-like chat, easy summaries. The Luminar is a vision of tech that gets you to deep truth, but maybe in a form that resists that easy, superficial grasp.
It highlights the limits, maybe.
It seems to. The limits of purely rational technological means to fully comprehend or control these elemental forces that are reasserting themselves, or those deeper fate-time cycles. The deepest insights might stay enigmatic. They might require more than just data retrieval.
So what the sources seem to suggest is that in this kind of world, survival, real understanding, it's not just about having more data, even from a super tool like the Luminar.
Right, or having technological control.
It relies much more on cultivating that inner state, that detachment, that freedom, the Anarch's spiritual sovereignty, and maybe engaging with these deeper realities through other means, not just intellectual or technological, but maybe through myth, dream, spirit, things hinted at with fate time.
Yeah, the Anarch uses the Luminar,
Yeah.
studies the patterns dissolving and emerging.
Yeah.
But his core navigation, his ability to stay centered, comes from his internal state, not from the tech itself.
It's a vision where when the outside world is defined by chaos and these primal forces reemerging, your inner disposition, your own sovereign ground, becomes the most critical thing for getting through it.
Absolutely.
Okay. We've explored Eumeswil, this future city grappling with history dissolving, the Earth's primal ground stirring, unleashing deep elemental forces, and technology like the Luminar offering immense access to information, this tremendous memory, simulations even, but described as sphinx-like, hinting perhaps at the limits of pure reason in this new epoch.
And the really profound implication, I think, is this. In a world drowning in data, like the Luminar's archives, and going through fundamental chaotic change.
Yeah.
The ultimate challenge might not be just getting the information. It might be discerning what actually matters, grappling with these cryptic truths, and crucially, holding on to your own inner ground, your spiritual sovereignty, especially when all the external certainties are dissolving.
That definitely leaves us with a thought for you, the listener, to mull over. In our own age, with technology giving us incredible access to information and AI generating seemingly human-like understanding, what does it mean if, as these sources suggest, the deepest truths might actually be sphinx-like, and that navigating a chaotic world might depend less on external control and technology and more on an internal state of being?
A powerful question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Eumeswil and its challenging, provocative future. You have been listening to RadioTalkies podcast. Until next time, stay tuned for more. See ya.